The US and China have surprised the world by unveiling a joint agreement to work together on climate change at the Glasgow summit. Together, the two nations are responsible for 40% of the planet's carbon emissions, so their cooperation is essential. For some analysis, Dr Bill Hare is the founder and CEO of the global research group Climate Analytics. He's attended every single global climate summit except this one due to COVID. He's following developments from Perth. Dr Hare, thanks very much for your time. The rhetoric in the US-China joint declaration is right, but is there the action to back it up?
Well, it's a good question. I think the bigger story here is that it's really great that the US and China are cooperating on so many different levels. I think that that's what's really, really interesting and strategically important about this announcement. On the substance, there are a lot of issues that they're going to work on in the short term, that is in the 2020s, and they're very focused on increasing action by 2030, and that's what's absolutely critical for Glasgow. So, of course, in this kind of declaration, you don't expect too many details. There are some quite specific ones. For example, the US is recommitted to getting to a carbon-free power system by 2035, some 15 years before Australia might, actually, for example.
Well, where does this US-China cooperation leave a country with Australia's position?
Well, look, if you look at the detail, I would be very worried because they're promising to cooperate not just on technology, but also on policies and the regulatory environment. And I think decoding that, knowing what I do about the discussions in China as well as the US, I think what's coming are carbon border tax adjustments ultimately. So both countries and indeed others in our region are going to be looking at how to protect their carbon intensive industries as they decarbonise. So I think that's very much on the agenda ultimately. China has an emission trading scheme, it's expanding. When that gets strength, they'll move in that direction too. So
what are you suggesting, that they might put tariffs on Australian goods to penalise them for not being, say, produced by renewable energy or so forth?
Exactly. I'm sure it won't just be Australia, it will be anyone selling carbon intensive goods into these economies is going to be subject to scrutiny, and if they don't match up with the Paris compatible standards, then they will get a tariff, a tax, basically. That's the way the world is moving now.
Australia's unemployment figures were out today and they were up. Can you understand that it's hard for politicians to make arguments around emissions reduction in industries where jobs are going to be lost?
Yeah, look, that's a critical issue nearly everywhere. It goes under different rubrics, just transition. But the bottom line for Australia, though, is that we just have so many employment opportunities in the renewable sector and in clean industry. It's really unusual. We've looked at a whole bunch of different countries in this way, and some will struggle to replace the jobs lost in coal. You know, South Africa is an example. But in Australia, the numbers are just overwhelmingly positive and often co-located in the regions that are most carbon intensive now. So to be honest, I can't really understand politicians not grasping that, because the problem is if we don't get on with that, we're going to leave these communities to hang out to dry as other countries take the lead.
Are we doing enough work yet in the space of skills training and adaptation to those kind of new jobs that can become available? I remember back in the 90s when the car industry and manufacturing things were closing, Paul Keating was talking about how we would move to helping people to adapt to their new jobs. Is that happening in this space yet?
Look, the states are working hard on that. We used to call it structural adjustment programs, of course, and we will need those. There's no doubt about it. We will need to put money into communities to help them get out of coal and so on. But we also need to be investing more in rolling out the technology. So looking around Australia, there's quite a few actions underway in Queensland, Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, pushing in that direction.
What do you anticipate the final statement out of Glasgow will look like?
Well, look, for me, the most critical thing, given that the whole purpose of Glasgow is to keep the 1.5 degree limit of the Paris Agreement in sight, is to improve the action by 2030. So what I'm really looking forward to is an agreement that there will be a head of government meeting next year, the end of next year, to really bring countries together and make a very big step in those 2030 ambitions and actions. That's what I'm really worried about, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. And I think that signal comes very strongly through the US-China Pact, actually. That's one of the most important parts of it.
Do you think that the goal to limit warming to 1.5 degrees is still achievable?
Yes, look, on the physics of it, the recent IPCC report shows it's still within reach. But what is really critical is if we don't halve emissions by 2030 and get down to zero by 2050, it will be out of reach. And particularly if we don't crack on with large reductions by 2030, it's going to be very difficult to get there, if not impossible.
Dr Hare, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leigh Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.